the speaker is not.
Oh, I'm not tall enough to be nervous about. It was 2002, 12 years ago, on a Friday afternoon, and I was having a rotten day. A couple of days before, the company's gas turbine generator, a huge generator producing electricity, it had blown up, thrown its guts. It was a $30 million accident. Right next to it was an identical machine, same make, same model, and only 3 months old, just like the one that had blown up. And I'm the corporation's risk engineer and a mechanical engineer, and my gut is screaming, we need to be shutting down this second gas turbine generator because it's on the verge of a catastrophic failure. But this is Texas in the summertime. This is when electricity prices had peaked. This thing was printing money. And nobody wanted to be the unpopular person to talk about shutting down this machine. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my boss, Adrian, walks into my office. He says, Dave, I need your help, mate. The president of the company has asked me to go up and visit with his staff to explain why our group is recommending that we shut down the second gas turbine engine. I need you to come with me as my technical resource. Can you get your thoughts together? And in 20 minutes, I'll meet you at the elevator. 20 minutes later, we're at the elevator. Before Adrian presses the button, he looks at me and he says, Dave, I got to be really honest with you. Today, we're probably both going to get sacked. And the reason we might get sacked is, you know, the president of the company, he's old school. He's got a hair trigger temper, and he's known that if he doesn't like what people are saying, he sacks them on the spot. For Adrian, this was not necessarily going to be a bad day because he was in his late 50s, and this would have accelerated him towards an early retirement. 12 years ago, I didn't have my American citizenship at the time. I was in the country on a work visa. Anybody know what happens when you're in the country on a work visa and you lose your job? You go home, you hug your family, you put a for sale sign on the front yard, you spin the globe and you wonder, wonder what country I can go and live and work in now. So as you can imagine, this was a very important communication meeting for me. Adrian and I, we went up to the executive, up to the boardroom, and you could literally cut the tension in the room. There were people in there looking at their shoes. The president of the company, his comb over was sticking out at an angle. You knew that tempers had already flared. It was like a mohawk that had fallen off. But, you know, he challenged me, he shouted at me, but I managed to keep my composure. I went through my points one by one. The insurance carriers, they've pulled coverage. They're uncomfortable with us keeping that second gas turbine generator running. I gave him the point that what we had out in the field was unproven technology. A lot of the manufacturers of these gas turbine generators in the US, they make efficiency changes to the design, but they don't test them. They give them to the customers to test and find out if it's a good change or not, or if there could be any problems. And the final point I made to the president of the company was that I was very proud that the top thing on the mission statement is that the safety of people is the most important thing. And I said to him, you know, it's going to create a really positive message to our employees if they see that gas turbine generator shut down. That night, he ordered the gas turbine generator be shut down. They did some preliminary inspections, and they did find that it was on the verge of a catastrophic failure. By Adrian and myself going up to that board meeting, we had saved the company over $30 million and also prevented them getting a red face or a black eye. Some of you might be wondering, and I get asked this a lot, especially by my wife, why did you go up to that meeting? Well, a couple of things. I respected and trusted my boss. He needed my help. And I also felt that I had the communication skills to get my points and message across. And I've been studying presentation skills and communication strategies for over 17 years. And what I want to do this morning is just take you on a road where we can explore the benefits of challenging individuals and groups in our companies to use creative communication skills to get their messages out to their audiences, to do things differently. So here's how I'm going to do this today. I'm an Irishman, I tell stories. So I'm going to give you some real life examples, and then we're going to step into these examples and just explore and see how that could impact your world or what some of the benefits could be. So the first example I want to give you is, I want you to imagine that you're construction workers working at a chemical plant in Texas. And you're out in the middle of the sunshine. It's 105 degrees. We can all relate to that little bit of sweat that drips off the end of the nose. And you wipe your eyes and you've got that salt starts to sting. So you're out there working, you're exhausted. Then you hear the out-of-place sound of an ice cream truck. And around the corner comes the ice cream truck, and at the side window is the chemical plant safety manager, and he's laughing and waving. The ice cream truck pulls over. The safety manager starts handing out ice cream cones. And he says, guys, it's hot as heck out here. This is the kind of temperature that you get dehydrated, you start suffering from heat stroke, and accidents can happen. I want you all to start looking out for each other. And the first sign of heat stroke, I give you my permission to shut down the job and get to a cooler area. So let's explore that. What are the benefits? If you were one of these construction workers, the safety manager has just handed out some ice cream cones. How do you feel? How does that make you feel? Any thoughts going through your head? Pardon?
People care. They care about you.
They care about you, and that's really important. You know, if anybody here who deals in the safety world or has safety people looking over your shoulder, these construction workers, the thoughts in their head might have been, you know, that safety manager, he can be a pain in the butt. You know, he's always sneaking up on us and giving out to us because we're not working as safe as we should be. And if we have an accident, oh my gosh, he just blows his top. Someday that guy's going to hurt somebody. But after the ice cream cones, they might be thinking to themselves, you know, the company really does care about our safety. That must have cost a couple of $100 to bring that ice cream truck in. And as for that safety manager, well, maybe he really does care about us. I mean, that was pretty creative what he did today. What I really like about this story is that this was not the chemical plant manager's idea to bring the ice cream truck into the chemical plant. It wasn't the safety manager's idea. It was a secretary's. Because she's on a team and they're tasked with the job of coming up with creative ideas to get that safety message out to the front line. And we all know how expensive accidents can be. You know, one at a time you can look at workers' comp costs, but on the other side, you know, one of the things I do as a technical engineer is I teach accident investigation. And if you were to add up even the simplest accident, how many hundreds and even thousands of hours can go into investigating accidents, and then all the communication that goes on afterwards. So applying creativity in the safety field, this is a very, very smart thing to do. Let me give you another example, and let's go into a corporate office. And imagine I want you to visualize an IT manager, and he's got 6 engineers working under him. And they're part of a really big project that's important for the company. But this group of 6 people and 1 manager, they're falling behind. So the manager, he calls his employees together and he says, guys, we're going to get noticed in a really bad way. I need somebody to volunteer and work on the weekends to get us caught up so that we can meet all our goals. So one engineer immediately puts his hand up without hesitating. And this is a guy, he doesn't just work 4 hours on Saturday and a couple of hours on Sunday. He puts 12 hours in on Saturday, 12 hours in on Sunday, Monday morning meeting, he's there beaming, his manager is beaming, and the project is caught up. And this manager is thinking to himself, you know, I'm really proud that I've got employees that will step forward like that, and without hesitating, they'll volunteer. And he thinks to himself, okay, how am I going to thank this employee? And here's what he does. He goes and with his own money, he buys a thank you card. He takes that thank you card and then he takes the elevators all the way up to the executive level, and he walks around to the executive offices and tells them, hey, you know, I've got this worker. He's really gone over and beyond his normal duties, and you know that big project that we're all really focused on? He's helping us make sure that everything comes in on time, and I'm confident that we're there. Can you write 1 or 2 lines just to thank him? So this manager goes from office to office. He gets a couple of kind words that are in there, or thanks. He then takes the elevator down a couple of levels to HR. And this company has what's known as a just-in-time reward system, where HR, with very little approval, can basically write a check for $100. He gets his check for $100. He puts it in the card. He puts the card in the envelope. And he doesn't send it to the employee. He sends it to the wife and kids, thanking them for the family time. And I'd like you to imagine now, if you're that employee and you come home and your wife is there at the door, your kids are there, the kids are holding a check for $100 going, we can buy Mount Everest of ice cream with this check. So how do you feel?
Pretty bubbly.
Yeah, you're feeling pretty,
gratified.
Pardon?
Pretty gratified.
Gratified, yes. You know, you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, look at all these nice words in this card. Hey, if some promotions come up, maybe these guys will have noticed me that. So, hey, and if they want to volunteer again, hey, if this is the way they reward, I'm going to put my hand up again. What about the family? What about the wife? What do you think's going through her mind?
She's proud of her man.
She's very proud of her man. And let's look how this manager may have turned that emotion upside down. You know, I live in a world where I do an awful lot of business travel, and I'm always trying to make sure that I don't step over the line of being away from the house too long. But here may have been a wife at home angry with the company. You know, okay, he's got a good job and they pay him well, but he's never around. You know, is it time we start looking over the fence to see if there's a better job out there? And so he's turned that around to where she's probably going, okay, you know, they work him hard, but hey, here's some recognition. They're not taking advantage of him. They really do appreciate what he's done. The other advantage that could come from this could be maybe she goes and tells her friends, or her husband goes to tell her friends, hey, you know, I got this great manager. I went and volunteered, did some work, and hey, all this recognition I got, and you never know, there might be somebody in the room that says, well, my manager sucks. Do you know if they're hiring? So anyway, you could end up with another little branch there where she becomes your, or herself or her husband become your best recruiters for a while. Another example of creative communication that is very close to my heart, and that is my wife. And my wife teaches English as a second language, ESL, to new immigrants. And she loves it. She comes home from these classes hopping and skipping. And when she comes home, even the first group, you know, the first day with her group of maybe 20 or 30 people, she says, they love me. And as somebody who teaches communication strategies, I go, well, tell me, what do you do? What do you do to break down those barriers? Because here you are, you know, middle-class white woman, and then you've got all these immigrants who have come, a lot of them have come from really bad backgrounds. You know, they've got their stories where they are doing their best to take those little steps and part of this great country. And I says, well, what do you do? And she says, it's very simple. I thought about when I started doing this, what have I got in common with these people that I can break down this barrier. And here's what she does. She basically tells them about her parents, and her parents were refugees from Hungary in 1956. And for those of you that don't know what was happening at that time, basically the Russians were in the country. Her parents, her grandparents were basically at the mayor kind of level, so they became targets. And those bad things happened. People were trying to jump the border. They would get shot. I'd walk the border with my wife. I got to see all the crosses there. But my mother-in-law talks about the day they decided to leave the country, to take the risk and jump the border. Herself and her boyfriend, who's eventually become her husband, they're walking through the streets of a city called Dieu. And there's a Russian tank there. And as they're walking along, the Russian tank turret is following them to intimidate them. So the next day, my father-in-law sold his motorbike. He had the equivalent of $100 in his pocket. They had all the clothes they could wear on their backs. They got in a taxi that could drive them as far as it could in daylight because there was a curfew. And then they walked the rest all the way to the border, crossed over a river, got arrested by Austrian soldiers, started their life off in a refugee camp, and then ended up going to Canada. So anyway, that's the story she uses. She uses her combination of English and Spanish to get that message across. And the important thing for you then again is to look at your audiences and look at your meetings, look at your training sessions. Have you got some story or something that can bridge that gap and as quickly as possible get your audience to love you and bond with you? It's going to make your communication so much easier. Before I get into my final segment, I'd like to open it up for a couple of questions. Anybody, any thoughts? Any questions on how you start this going in your business? Yep.
I'd just like to say that having been a manager in a large company and whatnot, the one thing in a lot of polls or questions with employees is recognition is a lot more important than even the extra bonus or whatever. Getting recognition and being pointed out as a good employee or having done something well is extremely important and good for morale.
Yes. And especially with the younger generations now, from what I'm hearing is the reward system is even more powerful if done creatively and if done properly. And you might be thinking, well, what are some of the things I could apply? You can just go out there and do a Google search on rewarding employees. You'll find books out there that'll give you, 1,001 creative ways to reward your employees because that boss, that manager, he could simply have gone to HR with a $100 check and he could have handed it to the employee and said, hey, great job, I appreciate what you're doing, you really helped us out. What he did took very little effort. I mean, it was basically the price of a stamp. He put his hand in his pocket, paid for the card. And the other thing I will remember, I say about creative communicators, if I was to ask you who's your favorite teacher, somebody would come to mind. Creative communicators, they remember you forever. They remember you forever. And people recognize you as a good human being. You're getting down into the emotional level. So this is something that's not used a lot, but it's really important. Any other questions? Let me go in, time is running out. Let me go into a final story. And this is one that, it's a story about a very good friend of mine. And it gets me chuckling every time I think about it. And I want you to imagine a 54-year-old project engineering manager, and his name is Matthew. And Matthew is standing in front of 94 Brazilian factory workers down in Brazil. He doesn't speak the local language Portuguese. They speak broken English. And he's just about to give a presentation. What really concerns me is that on the plane on the night before, with a full to the brim glass of wine, he'd said to me, Dave, Google Translator is absolutely amazing. I said, what do you mean, Matthew? He was saying, a couple of weeks ago, I cut and paste the text from my PowerPoint presentation, I put it in the Google Translator box, pressed the button, and voila, there it was in Portuguese. There was something about voila and Portuguese in the same sentence that caused me to ask him, Matthew, how did you learn the pronunciation, the intonation, and the accent? Oh, Dave, Google Translate has that covered as well. It has an audio feature. I've spent weeks perfecting this presentation. So there's Matthew standing in front of the 94 Brazilian factory workers, and he's speaking a language that sounds like a combination of German, Portuguese, and Klingon. I look around the room and I see the little impish smiles and factory workers nudging each other. And at the back of the room there's this big woman, and her face is bright red, and there's no doubt in my mind she's holding her breath, trying to stop herself from laughing out loud. As you can imagine, Matthew's presentation was what we call in English a complete and utter success. And you might be thinking to yourself, success, Dave? Are you off your mind? He spoke Klingon to the Brazilian factory workers. Well, here's what happened. The Brazilian factory manager went up to Matthew afterwards, and he said, Matthew, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. We've had visitors from North America, from the corporate office, for 21 years, and you're the first person to ever make an attempt at speaking our language. Today, you made us feel important. So by doing this, Matthew, he built respect, he built trust, and he ended up having a really good working relationship with this factory in Brazil for many, many years. Creative communication skills. It helps you build respect, it helps you build trust. It can increase camaraderie and collaboration, and it can help you develop a profitable business. It can increase your bottom line. Thank you very much.